Wassalamu ala rasulillah wa ba'd. All right, so uh, alhamdulillah, as the Sheikh said, Ramadan is around the corner, and it's important for us to prepare for it well. And one of the ways to prepare is to think about what are the things that we're going to be doing in the month of Ramadan, in particular, in addition to fasting as well as fasting, and um, what are some of the things that we need to prepare for in terms of knowledge, right? Because what happens is sometimes people have learned 90% of what you need to know for Ramadan, but you still need to fill in the 10%. And some people learn 100%, but they forgot 20%. So they need a reminder about the things that they've forgotten. And other people are brand new to Islam, and this is going to be the first time that they're encountering the month of Ramadan, maybe the first time that they're fasting. So they're going to get exposed to quite a few core principles as well as some details. So my advice for everyone is, if you are new to Islam, and some of you are new to Islam here, if this is your first Ramadan, the first time you're going to be fasting, focus on the core principles, right? In terms of like, what do you really need to do when it comes to fasting? All the little details, don't worry about them so much. You're gonna get those later on. Those details are more for the people who've been doing this for a long time, and then they're asking specific little detailed questions here and there because they got the foundation down already. Okay, so don't get overwhelmed by some of the details that we're going to cover today. The basics are for people who are doing this, learning this the first time, and people who are learning this for the 10th time or the 20th time. The details are for you. All right, so let's get started. So what is fasting? So Ramadan is the month of the Quran, which means that it was the month in which the Quran was revealed to the Prophet Muhammad, peace and blessings be upon him. The Quran was revealed over a period of 23 years, and the first revelation was in the month of Ramadan. So one of the ways to celebrate and commemorate the revelation of the Quran and the month that in which it was revealed is by fasting. So Allah told us that, hey, this is the month of fasting. We're going to make it special. And then we're going to have a day right afterwards. It's going to be a day of celebration. So fasting is one of the most important parts of Ramadan. It's not the only thing that we do, but it is something that we have to reflect upon. So what is fasting? Fasting, the purpose behind fasting is to increase you in self-control. And when you increase yourself in discipline and self-control, you get closer to Allah, and you could be a better Muslim. And now you can do the things that Allah wants you to do, and you can stay away from the things that Allah doesn't want you to do. So that's pretty much the underlying purpose behind fasting, and it's designed to get you closer and closer to Allah. Now, fasting itself has basically three things that you don't do. You don't eat, you don't drink, and you don't have intercourse from dawn until sunset. That's fasting in a nutshell. And we're going to get into more details with regards to that. So fasting is required in the month of Ramadan, and there's other fasts that you can do throughout the year, but the month of Ramadan is the month in which you fast every single day, and it's obligated. Now, who needs to fast? Well, first of all, any Muslim who has reached the age of maturity needs to be fasting. So what's the age of maturity? Right? The age of maturity is basically the age of puberty. So when it comes to children, and again, this is going to be a super summary, so I'm going kind of fast and I'm not going into too much detail because we don't have that much time. Usually this could be like a 3 to 5 hour, program, but I'm going to try and summarize it here. So if you have kids normally start praying at the age of 7. They need to start praying at the age of 10. When it comes to fasting comes a little bit later than prayer. The only reason why is because fasting is much more difficult. And the body type and the climate and the environment and the season is going to play a role. So when it comes to children are going to fall into the category of being very similar to elderly people. When people become very old and they get into a state where it's very, very difficult for them to fast, they're going to become ill, they're not going to be able to function. Then the children on the opposite end of the spectrum, even if they've reached the age of puberty, if they're unable to function, they're going to school, they're doing this, they're doing that, and they're just not even able to, walk around or something like that, then they're going to be exempted from fasting until they've reached a normal state where they're going to be able to fast. Otherwise, it is generally recommended that they start fasting, start trying to fast around the age of 10, or slightly before, or slightly after. Scholars have a difference of opinion on when is the right time to get them started fasting. But once they hit puberty, they're supposed to be fasting, but with the exception is that body types differ. So what's going to happen is, if they can handle it, they need to fast. And if they're not able to handle it, then they should be trying to fast as much as they possibly can. Number 2, somebody who is healthy. Somebody who's ill, if you're ill and you're sick, you're exempted from fasting. So this is so there's so far 2 exceptions to the rule. If you're a kid, I don't see any kids here, maybe kids at heart, right? But we're not talking about kids at heart. Yes, I know some kids at heart here. But actual children, they don't need to fast. Number 2 is, if you're sick, if you're ill, you do not need to fast. Now, what does the definition of illness mean, right? This is very important because I get questions like this all the time in the month of Ramadan. I have a headache. Should I break my fast? Do I not need to fast anymore? Or, I got the flu. Do I not need to fast anymore? So here's the kind of the way in which some people, they're too easy on themselves, and some people are too tough on themselves. And the goal is to really be in the middle somewhere. So here's the definition. If there's going to be harm to your body, like permanent harm to your body by fasting, or if you're sick and by fasting your illness is going to be increased, or by fasting there will be a delay in the recovery process that your body normally needs, then you're excused from fasting. So this is the exception to the rule. And Allah made life easier for us by not telling us that, you have to fast when you're sick. Otherwise, He could have said that. He said, you know what, even if you're sick, you got to fast anyway. Just lie on a bed, tough it out. He said, no, that's not the case. Allah is merciful. So if you're sick at that level, you don't need to fast. And if you miss a fast in Ramadan, you have to make it up. So if you're sick, you must make up that fast later on in the year. Now, if you can't figure it out and you say, well, I don't know if I'm very, very sick, or I don't know if I'm just a little bit of a headache, or if you're a coffee drinker, who's a coffee or tea drinker over here, right? So if you're used to that caffeine, that headache usually kicks in the beginning of Ramadan. Some of you are aware of this, right? That headache should not be a reason why you say, oh no, my head is hurting, I can't fast anymore. It's a caffeine thing. You should start cutting down right now. It's a good time to start limiting the number of cups of caffeine, or going decaf or something like that in the meantime. But that's not a good reason or a good excuse to skip fasting. So what you should generally do is you should consult someone who's an expert in medicine. Consult a doctor who understands the importance of fasting. So you don't just go and consult your random, what they call primary care physician, because they're obviously going to err on the side of caution. They don't want to be sued either. So they're going to say, no, you shouldn't fast. They need to understand the importance of fasting for Muslims, and then what potential harm that can do to you. And then they're going to give you a good balanced opinion if you can't figure it out for yourself. Women who are pregnant and they're concerned that either it's going to be harming their body if they fast, and it's a genuine concern, or it's going to be harming their child, they're allowed to skip fasting. There are some women who are pregnant, they don't skip any fasts except like the last week right before pregnancy. Or some of them, I know, they've never skipped a single fast. The whole time pregnancy, everything was fine, no issues with dehydration or anything like that. Others, they're not able to fast at all because they have a lot of issues throughout the pregnancy, dehydration, so many other things, and they should not be fasting. So it's on a case-by-case basis. The same thing when it comes to a woman who is breastfeeding her child. One of the issues that people are concerned with legitimately is that if you fast, your milk will dry up. And if your milk dries up, then it doesn't come back. So there should be a correct and objective assessment whether this is the case or not the case. Now, if there's a woman who's pregnant and then she's breastfeeding her child, and then later on after 1 or 2 years, then she gets pregnant again, and then she's breastfeeding her child again, then she gets pregnant again, and she's just going through this cycle, right? Even if she's missing several years, those fasts still need to be made up. Now, this is a difference of opinion among scholars on this issue, but my opinion is that they should be made up, but she has some time to make them up over a period of time. Number 4. What are we? No, number 3. Exception number 3. Somebody who has a chronic inability is excused from fasting. So what is chronic inability? If somebody is very advanced in age, it's going to be very, very difficult for them to fast. Now, are they going to recover from that? Unless they start getting younger, it's not likely they're going to recover. Somebody is diabetic. Somebody has some other condition. And it's not likely, there's no likelihood that they're going to recover from that condition. So it's chronic inability. They do not have to fast. Now, do they need to make up the fast? No, why would they make up the fast if they couldn't fast in the first place? There's no point of them making up the fast. So now they fall into a separate category. There's illness category, and then there's a chronic illness or chronic inability category. The people who are sick, or women who are pregnant or breastfeeding, it's temporary. The situation is not going to last. It's going to go away. They must make up the fast later on. The people who are in a chronic situation, it's not going to go away. So they're never going to be able to make it up. So what do they do instead? So what they're going to do is, for every single day of fasting that they're going to miss, they need to feed a poor person 2 average meals for every single day of fasting that they miss. Now, as you know, the price of food has significantly gone up recently, right? So what would you say the 2 meals, the average price for the average person, what would 2 meals probably cost approximately? $40 for 2 meals? What do you guys eat? It's it could be like $15, $20, something like that. I'm not sure if the amount has the amount been set yet. So usually what happens is, different mosques, people will ask them, well, we need to distribute this food to the poor, or we need to distribute this money for each, a day that we're missing of fasting, and we need to give it to the poor, but we don't know who to give this to. So can we give it to you and you give it on our behalf? And usually what the mosque will do is they'll say, okay, we'll calculate the approximate price of food, and we'll call this the fidya amount, right? So they'll write this on a box, and then what you do is they'll say like $15 per day or $20 per day, whatever their calculation is. Every day that you're going to be missing, you're going to be missing the whole month if you're in a chronic inability, right? So you're going to put in, let's say it's $20 times 30, you're going to put in $600, and they're going to go and they're going to feed poor people with that money, right? So that's what you're supposed to be doing when it comes to having a chronic inability, because you're not able to fast. So this is exception number 3. I'm going to take questions in just a moment. Just after this section. This is number 3. Number 4, if you're traveling, you're actually excused from fasting. Why? Because usually when people travel, especially in the past, you used to travel on a camel or on a horse, on a donkey or something like that. It's really tough traveling through the desert and all that. Now we have much more comfortable airplane, air conditioning, and all these seats and everything like that. But there's still some level of difficulty involved in traveling. So if you're traveling and it's tough for you, you have an excuse, and you don't have to fast that day or those days that you're traveling in the month of Ramadan. But if you can fast and it's really not that difficult, it is better for you to fast, right? So if it's not tough, so usually what happens is, if you're flying east, you're in California and you're flying east, so you're going from California to New York, is your fast longer or is it shorter? It's shorter because you're going forward in time. But if you're going backwards in time, now your fast is longer, right? So usually, if you're going forward in time, you probably should fast, because it's probably going to be so much easier for you than it normally would have been anyways, right? And backward in time, then you can make a decision how tough you are, and whether you can handle it. Do you get dehydrated on airplanes? All sorts of other things. But technically, you can skip your fast when you're traveling. You're allowed to. You're not supposed to. You're not recommended to. You don't have to, but you can. Do you have to make up the fast though? Is it a chronic condition that you're traveling for the rest of your life? No. So you're not going to be feeding any poor people when you skip a fast because you're traveling, because it's temporary. So you have to make up those fasts after the month of Ramadan is over. And the last exception is menstruation and lokia. So menstruation is when a woman has her monthly period, and lokia is postpartum bleeding. So after a woman has a child, then she can be bleeding for a period of time. So women who are in that condition, they don't have to pray, and they also don't have to fast. And when it comes to prayer, do they need to make up those prayers that they missed? No, because it happens every month. When it comes to fasting, do they need to make up the fast that they missed? Yes, they do, because it only happens once a year. So once a month would have been a lot to make up all those prayers that you missed. But once a year, it's not that bad, right? So Allah made it easy, but not so ridiculously easy where you don't have to put in any effort. So women who are in that period, they're going to not fast. They should not even say, well, I'm going to do it anyways. No, you don't fast, relax, drink your water and keep yourself hydrated and everything for your health. But you have to make up those fasts before the following Ramadan, whatever fast that you missed. Now, whoever's excused from fasting, if you're traveling or if you have your period, or even if you're a little bit sick or whatever it may be, let's just take traveling, perfect example. Let's say you're traveling somewhere. You're not fasting. But if you're going and visiting other Muslims and they don't know who you are, or you're going to the mosque, you're going to the masjid and you're going to be praying, should you come into Zuhr prayer with like a burrito in your hand and be like, hey guys, what's going to happen? People are going to be like, they don't know that you're traveling. You're not going to wear a shirt that says, by the way, I'm traveling, so that's why I'm eating, right? So if you have a legitimate excuse, one of the things that you should do is you should try to eat in private away from other Muslims so that they don't think that, hey, you're skipping fasting, or even maybe from some even your non-Muslim friends who might go and report on to your Muslim friend, by the way, I saw Muhammad, he was eating in the daytime. Yeah, but he was traveling. You didn't know that there's an exception, right? You guys were on a business trip together. So it's a different situation. So be very careful about that as well. Okay, so I'll take a few questions on this section before we move on to the next section. Does anyone have any questions on this? You had a question, right?
Someone who's in a different country and then there. So you pay based on where you live for someone who's back home?
Yeah. So if you're paying in a different country, the amount of food, it's technically, as long as they're getting the food with the cheaper price over there, it suffices. But what you should do out of piety is you should pay the amount that you would have had to pay here and give out extra charity, because you made the money here and you're getting a really good discount, right? The goal is not to get a discount and things like that. So you should try your best, even though you don't have to. You should pay the amount that you would have paid here. Pay over there the amount that you would have paid over here, right? So if you're giving it to, let's say, Bangladesh, instead of, I don't know, you guys said $40, man. You could buy like a month of food over in Bangladesh, man, maybe for $40, right? So what you do is whatever the $20 or $15 is here, pay that amount of food over there, right? Even though you don't have to technically, because as long as they're getting their meal, their daily food, it's enough. But it's better you do more because Allah has given you the money within this country. Okay, other questions? Yes. So the importance of fasting is developing self-control. And the self-control and the discipline is going to help you to be a better Muslim so you get closer to Allah. Okay? You're welcome. Yes. Oh, you mean okay? If you cross the date line, yes. If you cross the date line, the dates don't make any difference. It's simply the actual time of day that you're in. So don't worry about the number of the date. So when you're going backwards, there's no quick sunset and then sunrise that takes place. That's an artificial line. So just assume that you just look outside, and if it's daytime, you just go by the sun. Go by the sun. Don't worry about the date or the time, actually. Yes.
As you mentioned, pay the amount of the money
For the what?
For the chronic disease who have.
Chronic disease, yes.
So in that case, those money you have to pay to the poor people. Is there mandatory that they have to be need to be the Muslim? Muslims or non-Muslims?
Muslim, to the Muslims, yeah. Okay, let's move on to the next section. So, determining the month of Ramadan. Now, depending on which masjid you go to, probably many of you go here, right? So what happens is figuring out when the month of Ramadan starts. There's actually two opinions that exist among scholars. One of them is here at this masjid in IIOC, where they're going to be checking. There's actually more than two opinions, like 3 or 4 opinions. But anyways, the main ones are, one of them is they're going to be checking to see if the moon for the month or the crescent has been sighted anywhere in the world. And if it's been sighted anywhere in the world reliably, then the next day is going to be the month of Ramadan. Now, you cannot know in advance, if you follow this opinion, you cannot know in advance when the crescent is going to be sighted, because people are going to go outside one night before the month of Ramadan might start, and they're going to go check. And everyone around the world is going to go check. And if somebody sees it, then everyone's going to start the month of Ramadan, if you get the information. If you don't get the information, let's say somebody in another country saw it, but they didn't tell you. You're in America and you don't know them. So how are you going to find out? If you don't find out, you're going to assume it's not the month of Ramadan, and you're going to start the following day. So you're going to actually start Ramadan one day later. So this is one way to determine the month of Ramadan. So if you're going to be attending the Islamic Institute of Orange County, this is how they're going to determine the month. And what they're going to do actually is they're going to follow a body of scholars called AMJA, the Assembly of Muslim Jurists of America. So they're going to check the AMJA website, which is AMJA, A-M-J-A, amjaonline.org. And AMJA usually gets all these people go and start from other countries, sending them information. We saw it, we didn't see it. No reports from Sudan, no reports from France, no reports from whatever it is. If they get a positive report and it's a credible report, then they can announce by email or on their Facebook that yes, there's been a credible sighting, and they're going to follow it. So IIOC is one of the mosques that's going to check amjaonline.org, and they're going to be waiting for an update from the organization, and then they're going to start Ramadan like that. The second way is to try to calculate in advance whether the crescent is going to be sightable or not, with the 5-8 criteria, which is basically if the separation between the moon and the sun, don't quote me on this, but it's something like this. Separation between the moon and the sun is 5 degrees and it's 8 degrees above the horizon, then it means that somewhere on earth the moon can be sighted. And they say, since it's technically visible, whether we can get a positive report in time or fly somebody out to that location to let them see the moon or not, we still assume that the moon has been sighted. So this is called calculation. Now, the people who follow this opinion, they already determine when Ramadan is going to be in advance. And if you're wondering when it is, Apple somehow, if you have Apple Calendar on your phone, that's the one that the Fiqh Council of North America uses. So other mosques, they'll follow a different council called Yeah. Their Eid is Apple got the Eid off anyways. So anyways, but the thing is, so there's two main councils. There's a Fiqh Council of North America, and they use the calculation method. So there's going to be other mosques in the community. They're following this opinion where they've already calculated when Ramadan is going to start. So what you need to do is you need to decide basically which masjid is your home-based masjid, and you just follow them. All right, so your home-based masjid is like the one that you're generally going to go to, the one that you trust, the one that you're going to pray the most at. You pick that one. Whichever, both of these opinions are fine. Even the Amja said that both of these opinions are acceptable and they're valid, right? Which is a very nice statement that was made. So you pick one and you go with that timing, right? And if you have a family, try to keep the family on one timing, right? So whoever is dominant within the family, and usually you'd say, well, the men are just supposed to be the dominant people, but generally sometimes they're not, right? So whoever happens to be the dominant person, they're the one, they should try to keep the family together at minimum, right? That should happen. Okay, so that's determining the month of Ramadan. Any questions on that?
request. Moon was sighted, this was sighted or not. At a certain place, people, other, it may be a village away, not know.
Yeah, in olden times, the village may not know. So all the best they had was like a horse, right? So the horse is the fastest thing that they had. So somebody sees it, somebody gets on their horse, and they start riding. And they try and get the news to another location as quickly as possible. Many locations will miss out. So they're also in one country or in one region, there's going to be some places they said we didn't see the moon, so we're on different days. So it's not a big deal. We don't need to make such a big deal out of it. We have communication, but it's okay if not everyone's on the same date. It's fine. It's acceptable to Allah. Okay, other questions on this? Okay, so requirements for fasting. So what do we need to make sure, what do we need to do to make sure our fasting is correct? Right, remember, fasting is 3 things: no food, no drink, no intercourse. The timing is from dawn until sunset. Okay, so we're going to get into some of the details here. So the other thing that you need to have for fasting to be valid and correct is to have the intention. And the intention is just in your heart. You don't need to say anything like, I intend to fast in the month of Ramadan. Just, you need to know that you're fasting. If you're fasting in your mind and you're like, I'm doing this because intermittent fasting has very good health benefits and it will help my cells to repair themselves, and you're doing it for health reasons, that's not the right reason. You have to have the right intention. I'm doing this for Allah because Islam teaches me that I'm supposed to fast in the month of Ramadan. Now for Ramadan, if you make a general intention to fast the entire month, that's sufficient. So every day you wake up, you don't have to rethink again, I am making the intention again to fast. If you do, great. But before the month of Ramadan, just say, I intend to fast every single day in Ramadan. And then when you wake up in the morning, early morning to eat, and you're a little bit groggy or something like that, you already made the intention for the whole month. And that's fine. That's going to be more than sufficient. Okay. I'm going to skip some of that. Okay. So what breaks your fast, right? So we have to remember that the time for fasting starts at dawn and it ends at sunset. Now, what is dawn? Dawn is if you were to look outside at nighttime, and if there were no buildings and there were no mountains and there's no hills and you could see as far as you can, it would be the first stretch of light that you start seeing on the horizon as far as you can see. That's what dawn technically is. Now, you're not going to be able to see dawn if you live in a major city because there's too many buildings and there's too many hills and there's too much light pollution. What light pollution means is that because there's so many lights, your eyes are not accustomed to being able to see the dark. So you're not going to, and in the horizon, the light remains, there's like a little glow that remains. You're not going to be able to see the natural glow because you have an artificial glow that's always there because there's so many lights in the city. So the short thing is, how do you figure out when dawn is? Well, you're going to follow your home-based masjid and you're going to get their prayer schedule. And the prayer schedule is going to say exactly what time the time for dawn comes in, and you follow that. If you don't have the schedule because you're trying to save paper or they don't print their schedule on time for whatever reason, open up your app and you check for Fajr prayer. And what you do is you calibrate it, because if you don't have a home-based masjid with the time, then you're going to follow my opinion because I'm teaching the class. So my opinion is, and this is the Fiqh Council of North America and many other councils have adopted this, you're going to go to settings and you're going to make sure that under settings, it says 15 degrees for Fajr prayer. And what that's going to do is if you change that to 18 degrees, you're going to be starting your fast 25 minutes earlier. If you change it to 19.5 degrees, you're going to be starting your fast about 40 minutes earlier. If you change it to 12 degrees, you're going to be starting your fast maybe 25 minutes late, right? So this is not an exact science, but the approximate value and number should be 15 degrees. And I have an entire article written on my website, askthescholars.com, about why that is. You can read it if you're interested. So that's the dawn time. And then the same thing when it comes to sunset. Sunset is clear cut. You can find this out from any newspaper, or no one reads a newspaper anymore. Sorry, I'm living in the past. You can find this out from any website. You can find this out from any way you can determine sunset. Okay. So sunset is clear. So this is the time you start. This is the time you end. Now, what do you need to avoid? You need to avoid eating, drinking, intercourse. And there's one more thing, and that is vomiting intentionally. And let me get to that. So eating or drinking. What does eating or drinking entail? Can you eat one grape? Will it break your fast? Yes, it's okay. You can eat one grape. You're okay. It'll break your fast. Not one grape even. Do not eat a grape while you're fasting. You cannot eat one little morsel. You cannot eat one bite. You cannot drink one sip of anything. In fact, you shouldn't even drink one drop. You cannot drink one drop of water or juice or anything like that. So you're not going to eat or drink anything at all from dawn until sunset. Now, this includes any other substance that we don't normally call food or drink. Like, what about medicine? What about, also other, what about an asthma inhaler and all of these things? So let me give you the general principle. Anything that is intentionally entering your body and it has a nutritive value and it's going to reach your stomach is going to count as food or drink, because that's what resembles food or drink, right? So these are the two principles: nutritive value, and it's going to reach your stomach. I'll take questions in just a moment. So these two principles. So let's give you an example. Let's say Maryam is in the hospital and she's dehydrated. They need to put a glucose drip inside of her body. They're injecting it. Now, does that glucose have a nutritive value? Yes. Does it reach the stomach? It reaches the stomach. Yeah, absolutely. Because don't you urinate it out and stuff like that? Yeah, it comes out. So yes, it reaches the stomach. So that glucose drip is going to break her fast. Okay. If you take a vaccine, you inject it in you, does it have a nutritive value? Yeah, maybe, probably not, because it doesn't, unless it has some water. I don't know what's in the vaccines, right? That's a whole nother debate. Does it reach the stomach? No, it generally does not reach your stomach, so it's not going to break your fast. Okay, so that's eating and drinking and things that are similar to it.
I think the drip that goes into the bloodstream, not into the stomach.
It's still considered to, because you still urinate it out, right? So it hydrates you in a certain way. So it means by it's going to reach there and it's going to come out of your body. So it'll hydrate you. Yeah. So this is number one. Number two, when it comes to intercourse. So intercourse is going to break your fast. So you don't do that. Are you allowed to have any type of intimacy? Can you hug your spouse? Yes. Can you kiss your spouse? Yes. In fact, other types of even minor foreplay is actually allowed, as long as it's not done to the point where you're tempted to go further, because then you're putting yourself in dangerous territory of breaking your fast. This is going to vary from person to person, so you should be a little bit careful about that. When it comes to pleasuring yourself intentionally, if you do that and you climax, it's going to break your fast as well. But if you're sleeping and you have a wet dream, a nocturnal emission, it's unintentional, not going to break your fast. Okay. The third thing is vomiting. If you intentionally vomit a mouthful, like you actually, somehow get yourself to vomit, then it's going to break your fast. But most people would not do something like that. Unintentionally vomiting is not going to break your fast. Okay. So these are the things that break your fast.
Sometimes you just had your food and you burp and you can taste something.
Doesn't matter. Burping is not a problem, even if something a little bit comes out. I'll take question in just a moment. Let me say what else does not break the fast. So common questions that people have about, what breaks your fast and what does not break your fast, right? So let me see if I have something else here. Okay. So if you accidentally or you forgetfully eat something, it's not going to break your fast and you don't need to make up that fast. So, but you need to stop immediately. So let's say you're in the middle of the day. Somebody all of a sudden at work says like, hey, we got pizza for the whole company. And you're like, oh man, it's great. And you start eating and you ate half the slice of pizza already. And then you realized, oh no, I'm fasting. Okay? Now, what you ate before you remembered is excused. Now you're chewing that other bite and you're like, let me just finish this last bite. Now you remember, if you swallow that bite, your fast is broken. If you spit out that last bite, because you weren't remembering, your fast is not broken. It's Allah having mercy on you. He realized that you needed some food and you needed to forget. This shouldn't be happening too often, though. Otherwise, you got another problem, right? So don't be like, I'm gonna somehow forget that I'm fasting. All right, and then go get your pizza. All right. So if you forget or mistakenly eat food somehow, it's not going to break your fast. There are a few other things. If you taste food, let's say you're a chef or you're cooking something or you work in the industry, you're making some pasta and you're like, I don't know how much salt is in this food. I'm fasting. Are you allowed to taste the sauce, right? Your tasting is not swallowing. But if you taste it and then you swallow it, it's swallowing. What you do, you taste it and then you spit it out, right? If you spit it out, it does not break your fast. Chewing food without swallowing it does not break your fast technically. Now, why in the world would you chew food? If you need to chew food for like your child, maybe you need to soften it up or something like that. You know, if you have some good reason why you would need to chew something, it's fine. You know, if you're chewing gum, if some people ask this question, what can I chew flavorless gum because it helps stimulate the saliva in my mouth and helps me feel just a little bit better, right? It's disliked to do that. Because even if it's completely flavorless gum, it just the point is not for you to stimulate, you know, a bunch of saliva throughout your mouth in general, right? So doing stuff like that, it's better to avoid it, although it doesn't break your fast. But if you're chewing gum with flavor and you swallow the flavor, it breaks your fast. That's 100% clear. No. Next thing is using eye drops, using ear drops, using nose drops. None of these things break your fast. And if you use a nose drop, what happens sometimes if you go all the way, it'll come like this and it'll come into your mouth. So if it comes into your mouth, just make sure you don't swallow that. Just spit it out. It's not going to break your fast. Medicinal injections, I mentioned already, won't break your fast. Medicinal patches, nicotine patches, things like that, they don't break your fast. Even inhalers, now there's difference of opinion on this, but I've taken the opinion of Sheikh bin Baz on this, that the inhaler also, because it's not nutritive and reaching the stomach, it is not going to break your fast either. So that's one category, does not break your fast. Brushing your teeth just with water is not going to break your fast either. Brushing your teeth with toothpaste, right? If you swallow the toothpaste or if you swallow the water, it breaks your fast. If you don't, just be extra careful. It's not going to break your fast either. Okay? If you give blood, this is another issue. See, if you're giving blood, it does not break your fast. But if it's going to make you weak and you're donating blood in your fast and now you're like, oh, I feel a little bit lightheaded, I can't really move around and stuff, it's better you don't do that when you're fasting and you do it another time. Smelling incense or inhaling perfume does not break your fast. Okay? But most scholars have said that if you're smoking, vaping, hookah, all of these things, it will break your fast. There's a difference of opinion on this, but what matters is you shouldn't be doing this stuff anyways, right? Let alone outside of Ramadan. So this is a good time to quit that stuff. Lastly, rinsing your mouth with water, taking a bath just to cool yourself down, or swimming, as long as you don't swallow any water, all of these things are allowed. Any small amount of water that gets absorbed by your tongue or just stays in your mouth, mixes with your saliva, none of these things break your fast. Because even when you're making wudu, you're getting ready, you're going to be rinsing your mouth with water, you're going to spit it out. Not all the water comes out. Some of it gets absorbed by your tongue, some of it mixes with your saliva, and you're swallowing it. But all of that is overlooked, and that doesn't really count. Okay? Questions on that section about fasting? Yes. So if you have to take them with water, then no. So what you can do is take them earlier in the day. So ask your doctor if you can make an adjustment to take it on earlier on in the morning when you wake up, like around 4:30, 5 o'clock. Whatever the fast is going to be starting, right before dawn time. Okay. And what you do is consult with your doctor and say, this is going to be I know a lot of people who do this. So this is going to be my new routine. It's going to be before. And if you need to take one after sunset, you're going to do that. And they're going to give you like a routine of this is how you should get started now to start making that adjustment for the month of Ramadan. Okay. Other questions? Yes. No, she didn't say vitamins. Medicine. Yeah. Mm. Yeah. So multivitamin is a multivitamin.
No, I think it's vitamin D.
Vitamin D. You can easily find vitamin D everywhere that doesn't have pig gelatin in it. So find it. You go to any health food store, you'll find it without any animal products in there. You'll find a vegan version. So get the vegan capsules. Go to Mother's Market, go to Whole Foods Market, you'll find it. Yeah, sure. Yes, you had a question. They're not intentionally doing it, so no. So it has to be intentional. If they induced it, then yes. Otherwise, no. Okay. The question was sister's morning sickness. So if they didn't cause it themselves, if they didn't bring it themselves, then no, it doesn't break. Even if it's happening often. Yes, sister. Yeah, so we say if it's accidentally, no, it doesn't. It's okay. Yes.
Because I know from the student that it's supposed to be late, but a lot of time because of this problem acid thing, a lot of time it's just it happens, and I feel like kind of prefer to eat something from my stomach than my throat. So what's my solution?
So if you feel like acid reflux and you feel like a little bit burping and so you feel something in your throat or something like that, don't worry about that. Don't worry about that. So as long as nothing's coming out and you're re-swallowing it again, intentionally, you don't have to worry about it. Yeah. You don't have control. So if you don't have control, then that means you did not intentionally swallow it. So it goes into the accidental category. Yeah. Yeah. You don't need to worry about that. Inshallah. Anything else? Yeah.
So going back to the first category we're talking about, can you pay on behalf of somebody else who's sick, unemployed?
No. So you don't need to pay on behalf of anybody else who's sick or unemployed if they cannot afford it or something like that. This is for that person specifically. Okay. If they're exempted from fasting. Now it's recommended to wake up in the morning and eat an early meal before dawn. It's called suhoor. Right? So this is something, highly recommended. So some people, they're just like, no, I'm just going to sleep through it. I'm okay. I already ate a good dinner. It's actually recommended because it's really going to help you. And you should try to make that meal healthy, right? Don't drink Coke, don't something dunked in oil and donuts and stuff like that. This is going to destroy, it's going to mess you up. So you want to have something good and healthy early in the morning. So you wake up about 30 minutes, 20 minutes before dawn, 40 minutes before dawn, and you eat something that's nutritious, that's healthy, that's going to give you energy. Highly recommended. Don't try to miss that. When the fast is over at sunset, you should break your fast as soon as you can. You should not delay. So if you're going to be on the road and you're going to be stuck in traffic, you should make sure in advance that you take some food with you. So you have something with you. Otherwise, you'll be like, yeah, I'm not hungry. I'm okay. I'll just break it 30 minutes later. You're not supposed to delay, actually, because you're supposed to follow what Allah tells you. Allah says you start here and you end here. You end when Allah tells you to end, which is sunset. So when the sun goes down, you should break your fast, keep some water in the car with you or date or something like that. When you break your fast, recommended to break your fast with date, right? So date palm tree, any type of date is fine. So there's many different types of dates, but this is what the Prophet did, and he recommended other people to do. And you should eat an odd number of dates. You can eat 1, 3, 5. No, don't get into the 20s. It's way too many, right? But any odd number is fine. And if you don't have dates, the next thing that you can do is just drink some water, and make sure you hydrate yourself. And when you break your fast, there's actually a prayer that's supposed to be said. There's two different prayers. I'll just mention one of them. It's ذهب الظمأ وابتلت العروق وثبت الأجر إن شاء الله. The thirst is gone, the veins have been moistened, the reward is affirmed if Allah wills. So this is what you can say when you're about to break your fast before you take your date, or right after you eat your date, you can say it as well. So if you need to make up fast and you missed something, you had a legitimate reason, then you should do so at your earliest convenience. When you're making up the fast, it's better if you make them up consecutively, but if you can't, you make them up intermittently. That's also fine. If, now this is a big thing, if you just decide in the month of Ramadan you're fasting, and this, let's say, you're not a new Muslim, you've been Muslim for a while, you don't have any other valid excuse, this is not your first time ever fasting, and you decide, you know what, I'm just hungry. I didn't wake up in the morning, my alarm didn't go off, I didn't eat a proper dinner last night. You know what? Forget this. I'm just not fasting today. And you're not going to get sick or anything. You're just going to be a little bit more thirsty and you're going to be a little bit hungry. And you say, that's fine. It's not that big of a deal. I'll just break my fast. The penalty for doing that, because you're violating the sanctity of the sacred month of Ramadan, the penalty of doing that is you have to make up that fast afterwards, and you have to make up 60 additional penalty fasts in a row, because you didn't care for the month of Ramadan. You're just like, I just don't care. I'm just going to break my fast. So this is a very serious thing. Ramadan is a very serious thing. You do not take it lightly. You take it very, very seriously, because it's a holy month, and Allah has told us that we're supposed to be fasting during this month. Okay. Fasting beyond Ramadan. Let's see. Taraweeh prayer. So another thing in Ramadan is there's an extra prayer about an hour to 2 hours long called Taraweeh. So there's 5 prayers in the day. And the last prayer in the day is Isha. And after the Isha prayer, there's going to be an extra prayers that only happen in the month of Ramadan inside the mosque. Now, it's not only inside the mosque. Some people think it's only in the mosque. You can pray Taraweeh prayers at home as well. So it can be in the mosque, it can be at home. And what you're going to do is you're going to pray either 8 or 20 units of prayer, usually. And they're going to be by twos. You go 2, 2, 2, 2. That would be 8. And I'm not going to do the other one for the 20. Just 2 times 10. All right? And you're going to get 20 units. So here, if you come to this mosque, they're going to be praying 8. They're going to try to recite a large portion of the Quran, and you just join the Imam behind him, listen to the nice recitation, and this is Taraweeh prayer. It is recommended. It's not a requirement. So if you can do it, great. If you can do half of it, do half of it. If you can't make it to the masjid, you pray it at home. And if you can't pray it at home because you're just really tired and you have work early in the morning, at least you have to pray your Isha, because that's the required prayer. Don't try to skip your Isha and then do your Taraweeh prayer, because then you're choosing something optional and you're skipping something that's mandatory, right? So be careful. Or don't say you wait all the way the whole night and you pray all the Taraweeh prayers, and then you don't wake up in the morning for Fajr prayer because you're too tired. You went for the optional and you skipped the required, right? So make sure you don't make that mistake. But it's a beautiful thing that usually the Quran, a large portion of the Quran is going to be recited during the Taraweeh prayer. So this is something that used to happen with the Prophet, peace be upon him, is that the angel used to come to him every Ramadan and he would review the entire Quran with him during this time. So it's something very similar to that when we recite large portions of the Quran. And he did it twice in the last year. So in the last 10 nights of Ramadan are special. They're extra special. So Ramadan is special, and the last 10 nights are even more special, because that was around the time where the first revelation of the Quran came down. And there's a night there called Laylatul Qadr, which is the night of decree, the night in which the Quran was actually revealed. And this is a special night. So what you're supposed to do is try to pray as much as you can during the last 10 nights, up the amount of extra prayers that you're doing relative to what you were doing previously. Okay. And the last two things. One of them is i'tikaf. I'tikaf means seclusion inside the masjid. So what that means is in the last 10 nights of Ramadan, it is recommended, and only very few people do it, but it's recommended that some people, they come to the masjid and they stay there the entire 10 nights. They're not going to leave the masjid unless they got to go to the bathroom or they have to, do something very quick, very, very important errand or something like that. But they stay inside and they just, being inside the masjid gives you a sense of presence and state of mind and all of that. So if you can do that, it is good. And if you can't, that's fine. There's going to be a few people who are doing that. And the last thing is, I don't know. I don't need to cover this in detail. But basically, the day after Ramadan is over, there's going to be the day of Eid. And around that time, right before, you have to be paying another type of charity called Sadaqatul Fitr or Fitra. And that's a charity somebody else will remind you about later on, about a month into Ramadan, inshallah. Okay, so I'll open up to questions. Anybody have any questions about the things that we covered or about Ramadan or about fasting or anything like that? Yes. Injecting the blood, that's fine. Yes. No. Oh, good question. So does the Taraweeh prayer replace the Witr prayer? No, so you're going to pray Isha and then Taraweeh and then you end with the Witr prayer. And they do that inside the masjid too. So they're going to do it in that order and the Witr prayer will be prayed together as well. Yeah.
I know they have a lot of programs late at night during the last 10 nights, but is there any masjid that actually has it here?
Has it i'tikaf? They have it here? Yeah.
So you can actually sleep there?
You can sleep here. Wow. Bring a heater. Yes, you can sleep here. So I think, they did in the past at least. I don't know if their policies changed, but yes, they usually have accommodation here. There's many masjids that have it. Garden Grove Masjid has good accommodations. They have showers and everything like that. Here they have a shower up in the office. And Tustin Masjid is another good place. Tustin Masjid really spoils the people that are there. They give them like a ton of food and desserts and all sorts of things because they're really big on encouraging etikaf. So some places they have better arrangements. Some places don't have as good arrangements. Some people are concerned and say, well, what about my food? I'm going to have to wait in line for food. Who's going to drop my food? And now you could just do DoorDash and, the Uber Eats and stuff like that. It's much easier to get your food if you're doing etikaf inside the masjid. Yeah, bring a sleeping bag, stay warm. Yeah, at night. But then you're allowed to sleep. You're not going to stay awake all 10 nights. So yes, you could be sleeping too. Yes, inshallah. You take if you're an i'tikaf, you take. Yeah, of course you take a nap. Yeah, take a nap, take a shower, do what you need to do, rejuvenate yourself. We'll take one last question and then we have to break for Isha prayer, inshallah. Yes. So etikaf, it used to be for women. I don't know, different masjids, sometimes they don't have the arrangements because they're concerned about security and things like that. It used to be during the time of the Prophet, peace be upon him. Nowadays, I don't know who allows it, but technically it could if there's a group of people. Yeah. Do they have it here? Oh, okay. I'm not sure. So but there might be some masjids that have it for women as well. So like if a group of women come together, they can do i'tikaf. Yeah. I think the issue used to be here was just a security issue. They're just concerned for the safety of the sisters. So in terms of women doing it at home, there are some scholars who've said they can do it in their prayer area and they're not going to leave that prayer area. So I'm iffy on whether that's a strong opinion or not. This is a Hanafi position, but evidence for it is not that strong, but it's a minority opinion in the Shafi'i school as well. Okay. Yes. Yes, yeah, 60 days. Yeah, correct, yeah. So we gotta leave it at that, inshallah. Hopefully this was beneficial. Subhanakallahumma bihamdik. Ashhadu an la ilaha illa ant. Astaghfiruka wa atubu ilayk. And if you ever have any more questions, you can just ask through my website, askthescholars.com, or you can email the masjid, inshallah. Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullah.